Hi, everyone. Good evening, good very late evening to others. We're so glad you're here. My name is Tahil Sharma, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for North America here at the United Religions Initiative. For those that have not heard of URI, we are the largest grassroots network of interfaith organizations in the world, with 1,100 chapter organizations called cooperation circles in over 110 countries. And as the Regional Coordinator for North America, I work with about 95 of these interfaith grassroots organizations in the United States and Canada. And we're here to welcome you to this very unique conversation that we're having in an interfaith context. Because oftentimes when we think about interfaith cooperation and harmony, we often don't talk about other identities that exist outside of religion and spirituality in this space. So back in 2021, I started having some conversations with colleagues at the United Religions Initiative about what it means to really consider yourself someone who is a part of the interfaith movement, who may identify with some sort of worldview and happens to also navigate a non-straight or non-cisgender identity in the world. And the common answer that I got was people felt accepted, and people were able to do that work together. But the second question that I followed up with was, have you ever had those identities centered before in this process of doing interfaith work? And many people responded by saying, actually, no. They've never considered an intersectional interfaith work that actually honors different identities of an individual as they do interfaith cooperation. So this has started a conversation in URI and a number of interfaith spaces, and getting to think about what that means, what that looks like. And this year in 2023, North America, especially the United States, has had quite the influx of approaches in trying to understand why we should be talking about gender and sexuality in any space in society. We've heard that hundreds of bills are trying to be passed at many levels of legislation, locally and statewide around the United States. And many of them have been passing, which have been discriminating against queer and trans people, drag performers, and their allies. And I think why we're here to have this conversation in this space is because oftentimes the interfaith movement does not know how to even engage in the conversation of intersectional identity when it comes to interfaith work. And we want to make it an intentional opportunity for us here today to be able to do that. And that's why I've been able to invite, with a lot of privilege and a lot of gratitude, three wonderful folks that I've gotten to know in different ways. They are colleagues, they are friends, they are mentors and role models. Some of them I know for a very short time, some I've known for years, and they all are here to provide some sort of perspective to their ways of navigating these intersectional identities, while also being able to share some advice, some wisdom, and some best practices on how you all in this space are able to engage in these conversations and the work for LGBTQ equity. So I'm here and very thankful to present our three panelists. First is Salome Irimekyen Samuel, who comes in from Abuja, Nigeria. Their pronouns are they and them. They are a peacekeeper that is a part of the Euphrates Institute community. And I'll be sharing each of our speakers' bios in the chat box so that you can read more about them. I'm also here to present Felipe Zurita Quintana, who is a staff member of the Charter for Compassion, another very significant organization in interfaith spaces and in the work for compassion, who also happens to serve as the chair for URI North America's Leadership Council. And we're also here with Bishop Deon Johnson, who is the, if I remember correctly, Bishop, please do correct me, you are the first out gay bishop of color in the Episcopal Church.
The Anglican Communion.
and the Anglican Communion at large, which is, I think, a very significant thing to hear for folks in this space and for folks who are going to be a part of this larger conversation going forward. It's great to have all three of you, and I'm very thankful. So I'd like to jump right into conversation and give each of you about 5 to 10 minutes to talk about your unique story. What has been your relationship with your religious, spiritual, indigenous, or secular background? How is that intersected with your understanding of your gender or sexual identity? And how has that brought you into the position or the spaces that you work in today? So I'd like to start with Bishop Deon, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'll just jump right on in then.
Yeah, please.
Well, thank you. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to fill 5 minutes, but so I was born and raised on a Caribbean island of Barbados. So I'm also an immigrant. So you can throw that into the long list of firsts. So I was born on the island of Barbados, which sits in the the southern part of the Caribbean Sea. And I was born and raised Anglican, so which is every place else but United States called the Anglican Church. And one of the very formative things for me was my grandmother, who often said to my brother and I, as a good reminder, you are a beloved child of God. And remember, you must treat others as if they are a beloved child of God too. So from a very an early age, I was always affirmed in who I was, and challenged to always affirm other people's dignity and personhood as well. And so that has and continues to be a part of my guiding principle, that when it's people, you just simply show up. Um, I served before becoming bishop, so I'm jumping forward a bit. Before becoming bishop, I served in congregations in New York City, specifically St. Luke in the Fields. St. Luke in the Field was one of the first Episcopal churches in New York City during the early AIDS crisis to actually reach out to the members of the LGBTQIA plus community that were being ravaged by AIDS. And they've had one of the longest serving people with AIDS dinner that's been going on. And then after that, I served congregations in Ohio, Shaker Heights, and then most recently, before being elected bishop, I served in the Diocese of Michigan, which is the bottom half of the state of Michigan. And I served a congregation there. I was their second openly gay rector, which this congregation had a long history of inclusion. And then on November 19th, 2019, or November 23rd, sorry, 2019, I was elected to be the bishop of the Diocese of Missouri. And I can tell you all that I had not planned on being elected. I had planned on, they're not ready for, Black, married, openly gay with children bishop in Missouri. But I think the Holy Spirit had other plans. And not only did they elect me to be the bishop, they elected me on the first ballot, which doesn't happen, with over 60% and 60% of the vote going to elect me. So they were overwhelmingly saying, no, we really want you to be our bishop. And since I've been here, we have tried in many ways to center those people who have often been pushed to the side. So the key watchword that has been part of my ministry here in the Diocese of Missouri so far has been intentionality. If we're not intentional of centering those who have been often pushed to the side, we can't make any kind of change. So I continue to do that work, and it continues to be lots of fun. So I say to my bishop colleagues, I'm having fun. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to or not. But I thoroughly enjoy what I do. And I think a part of the work that I think the church is called to do in this time and place is to be a force of healing. One of the things that we did this past June as part of our Pride celebration here in the diocese is that we sent out to all of our congregations and anybody who wanted a copy of them, yard signs that said, for the hurt the church has caused, we are sorry. And people kept thinking about, is this some kind of like flashy campaign or something? And it's like, no, this really is us on the behalf of the church saying, we are so sorry for the way that others have been treated, that people have been hurt, that in the name of Christians, people have been pushed to the side. And our goal wasn't to get people to come running to our churches in droves or anything. Our goal really was to just apologize. One of the things that I do every year at Christmas and at Easter, when grandma drags you to church or drags the rest of the family to go to church with her, I make a public point of asking for forgiveness for the ways that either my actions or the actions of the church has hurt others. Because I'm a firm believer that the first step in healing is acknowledging where you have caused harm and hurt. And so that has been a guiding part of my ministry, and I think it continues to be a guiding part of my ministry, where we can be a place of reconciliation and healing. So I'll stop there, because then you'll get me into preaching.
I could expect nothing less from someone who served in that position. But thank you, Bishop Deon. That your journey and your story is, I think, really important for people to hear, especially in the context of how we understand faith leadership, or those who take on typical forms of religious leadership, while also getting to knock down a lot of barriers and assumptions that we make about those who represent us at the very front of the church rather than at the very back. So we really appreciate that perspective. Next, I'd like to go to our colleague, Salome. Salome, if you can hear us, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, all right. So first of all, I would like to thank Bishop Deon for the apology to the people that the church has caused a lot of harm, of which I am one. I grew up in a Christian family, going to church, loving God. And then along the line, I discovered that I had same-sex attraction. So aside from my same-sex attractions, I also that identity. So this also intersected with my identity, coupled with the kind of society I live in. I am from Nigeria. And in my country, same-sex attraction is illegal. And you get to hear it right from beginning, especially in church. My family is very, very Christian, conservative Christian. I grew up as an evangelical. And during my university days, I struggled a lot. My own journey has been that of a lot of internal struggles, trying to reconcile, okay, how do I become straight? Because I grew up being told that I'm not even supposed to be in church until I am delivered. And so there was a time I remember I went to a church and I did, I think, 21 days dry fasting and prayer so that I can stop having same-sex attraction. But I still couldn't. And I just got to a point where I just told God that, okay, I've really tried to see that I'm not attracted to same sex. I can't, but I've made up my mind that I'll still serve you with my attraction like that. So before then, I stopped going to church, because any church I go to, I started changing church. I grew up evangelical, and then I started going to Pentecostal church. When I start going, I don't get to hear them talk much about homosexuality, but along the line, they'll start preaching about it. So when I decided that I was going to still serve God like that and be going to church, because I missed going to church. I really like going to church. I loved reading Bible stories when I was coming up. And I read Christian religious studies in the university because I did very well in Christian religious studies. So, and then one day I was in church, and then I became very committed. I had never been very committed in church. And so this time around, I said, okay, I'm going to go and serve God like that in spite of everything that I've been hearing, because I've tried, and then instead of staying away from church because I love church, I'll still go. So I went, and then I became very committed. I joined a lot of church groups. I was in prayer units. I was in sanctuary. I was very, very committed. And then this time around, when the pastor talked about it, it really, really got to me. And I said, okay, I'm going to try and check this thing for myself. All my life, I've just been hearing that God does not like homosexuals, but I've not really gone to check and see if it is actually universal, if nobody has ever contradicted that. So I started doing some findings, and I told myself that if I don't see anywhere where there are Christians that are gay, and then I'll just force myself, and I won't do anything with any. I'll remain celibate. That was what I resolved within myself. So I started checking, and then this day I was on YouTube, and I saw this video by Matthew Vines. He wrote a book, God and Homosexuality. So I listened to the video, and then that was how I started having different perspective about God and the church. So I now told myself that I won't bother again. I'll still go to church because I love going to church. I love God. In as much as the pastor feels this is it, and then we don't have anything like that in Nigeria, because the only pastor we had in Nigeria, I can remember many years ago, he was in Lagos, Reverend Jide Macaulay. He was a pastor in Nigeria in Lagos. And one day, some mobs, people in his area, just went to the place and they removed the roof, they destroyed everything, and they had to give him I think he left for UK or so. Ever since then, we've not had anybody that was bold enough to come and say, okay, I am a pastor and I am blessing queer people. But I decided that, since, even though it is not in Nigeria, because I know that God is universal and Christianity is, because I saw that people had a different view, I am still going to church, in as much as I don't come to say, okay, because I love going to church and because I saw that other people are still serving God with their queerness. And I'm really, really excited this evening to listen to Bishop. This is the first time I'm actually seeing somebody who is a pastor in real life, and he's even like apologizing on behalf of the church. So it really means a lot to me, and I'm really, really so grateful. So this is just, I don't know if it's up to 5 minutes, but this is just the background of my story and my experience with my sexuality and faith so far.
Salome, thank you so much. And we love that the space is also serving as a healing space in its own way. Whatever, the divine chooses to do in these spaces is up to them. And I'm very thankful that you shared your story with us, and looking forward to the deeper dive we're going to have in a bit. And finally, Felipe, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dahil. First of all, I wanted to thank both Salome and Bishop Deon for sharing the words that you shared. I feel like when coming to this space, I almost have like this duality of what I want to share, in the sense of like me being a gay person and sharing my experience, but also admonishing religious institutions and communities and how to deal with people that are queer and how they're gay. So I was born and raised in Chile. I was the oldest children of 3 in a very conservative family, in a very conservative community. And I feel like I kind of like figured out that I was gay when I was like 12, and I was terrified. And I think this is a very common feeling that happens with little queer kids that are raised or grow up in conservative communities, in religious communities, where you hear constantly that your nature is against God, that it is not divine, that it is sinful, that it's not good. And we grow up with that. You can have a very, very intelligent person, and you can have a very motivated person, but being in that group categorized as gay or queer fully diminishes your dignity, your value personally and into your community. So as a 12-year-old gay kid, I could not for the life of me disappoint my family, disappoint my community, disappoint anyone. I grew up Catholic. At 12, I had a friend that was a Mormon from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, an LDS person. And at that moment, because I didn't feel safe enough to come out to a bishop, a counselor, a teacher, my parents, my siblings, I didn't feel safe enough. As a 12-year-old kid that was raised in a conservative religious community, the only thing that I could think of was to have a deal with God so that I could go with myself and see how can I, and this sounds so horrible now, but at that time was, how can I heal myself from this? For people that are not gay in this forum and in this panel or whatever, I hope that you understand how hard that is. I'm so sorry, but like, I want you to understand how hard that is for a kid that probably has like a ace all around, does well in sports, does well in science, but is gay, and attaches his value to that, and thinks that he or she or they are not worth anything because they're not in this divine plan that they have been taught their whole lives. It's rough, man. So as a 12-year-old, I converted into the Mormon church because I felt like it was a higher commitment to God. Maybe by committing myself harder to this divine character that I have been taught my whole life, I could get healed at some point. Past the years and whatnot, I served the Mormon mission. For those that don't know, in the Latter-day Saint faith, you go on a religious mission for 2 years of your life. When I became a missionary at 19, it was for 2 years, 19 to 21. Now it's 18 to 20, but same concept. I truly believe that like maybe committing myself fully to God and giving my life to God, I will get healed. Thankfully, halfway into my mission life, I was serving in Sacramento, California for 2 years, and you stay in that area for the 2 years. During that time, I was in 07, 09. California is going through gay marriage, the voting of like trying to pass it or not and to approve it or not. And I remember being in very like intense leadership meetings with leaders of congregations around the area, and how the conversation went from like, yes, we're talking about Jesus and everything, to mobilizing communities to vote against marriage equality, against gay marriage. And it was at that point that I had like one of those like moments, just like, just like a switch almost, where I realized that I was fine, that I am divine, that I am worth everything, just like everyone else. I realized that my existence wasn't against the divine, but it was with the divine. I realized that I didn't have to submit myself to other people's ideas of what is worth, what is worthy, or what is accepted of God, because I realized that God is within me and around me. I am God. You are God. we are all God because God is us. And you can fight me, you can argue me, and whatever you want, because that's what I think, right? And that's the conclusion that I came with. But I left everything. I mean, I think I'm super grateful for all upbringing, all the things that I learned during my Catholic time, during my Mormon or LDS moments. I did learn so much, and I became a better person because of it. But because also of how gay people are treated, not only in Christianity, but other religions in general, I chose to distance myself from all of it. I consider myself a very spiritual person. I see you on this like cameras and this little squares on Zoom, and I know that I'm connected with you. I know that I am with you and you are with me, and we are one, because we all are. And that's why my belief system is and has been since that moment, which I hope that with this video, even if it's not live, you're watching this recording later on, I hope that you understand, for the gay kid that is watching this, I am so sorry. I'm so emotional about it, but to know that your worth is divine, just like everybody else's. And I hope that for everybody else that is watching, that is not that gay kid, that is not that trans kid, that is confused and lost and wants to find comfort, for you, the leaders of the church, for a bishop, for a leader of a congregation, know that there are people there that are looking for answers, that are looking for comfort, that are looking for any way to feel validated, for the existence to be validated. And if you do not fulfill that, I understand that we're all human, that we make mistakes, and we don't know it all. But you will be losing that person, that member of your congregation, because that person is not being understood or validated in the most intrinsic sense, which is existence. I'm truly grateful to have this platform right now, because we are able to talk about such a sensitive, such an intense topic that truly can like change the life of people. Kids are committing suicide left and right because they're not feeling supported by the religious groups. And so I am so grateful, Tahil, and everybody else at URI, that you are able to host a panel where we can have conversations, talk about this. And I hope that, like, for everybody else that is watching this and hearing this, I am an open book and I'm happy to answer any questions. Know that I am happy, and that I know that I am connected to all of you, and that I am one with the earth, I am one with you, I am one with water, with air, with a rock, because all of this is the creation of the divine. And I couldn't feel more complete, but it was a journey.
Thank you, Felipe. We're really grateful to you and your willingness to be vulnerable, your willingness to be honest about the ways that we're engaging in this conversation, and to offer yourself as the wisdom-filled person that you are. I deeply have gratitude for it for the longest time that I've known you, but I think a lot of people on this call and who will be watching will appreciate it too, especially those queer and trans kids that definitely need to hear this message right now. So thank you for that. I will take a bit of privilege in that way to also, I think, share a bit of my own story, just as a point of, getting to share and resonate with a lot of what I've heard from Salome, from Bishop Deon, and from Felipe. I identify as bisexual and came out 3 years ago on July 4th during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's just say fireworks happened for many reasons that day. And I considered it a journey of my own liberation and independence from a world that is seen through a heteronormative lens, that is seen through a singular idea of what it means to be an American, a person of faith, a person who is LGBTQ, and so many other things. I grew up in an interfaith family as a Hindu and a Sikh. I grew up in a city like Los Angeles, which is hyper diverse. And it meant for me that, meeting people from all walks of life was a very normal idea. But the more I moved to places where it was very clear that others thought of themselves as better or morally outright or the ones deserving of rights, it started becoming very clear what parts of me were okay to live and what parts of me were not okay to even discuss. And through this journey, I think a question of sexuality came up for me often as someone who did have, feelings for folks that were, men and women of my age, that made me feel compelled to not necessarily share it with anyone, because I came from two faith communities that, one, did not have a lot of conversation around gender and sexuality in general, but secondly, did not even allow for theological discourse about those things in temples, in homes, or anywhere else. So when I practiced my religion, I went to the temple with concern that I would not be accepted if I came out. I would think about how if my prayer is justified because I don't identify as straight. And I always navigated these spaces of still doing my activism work when I wasn't out as an ally, trying to figure out, is there a place for me to be able to find grace? Is there a place for me to be able to find redemption? Am I genuinely doing something wrong, or is something being hidden from me that I don't know about? And that's when I discovered the depth at which I needed to understand my own faith traditions. As a Hindu, one of the oldest religions in the world, arguably as old as Judaism, some may argue more, that's for a different conversation. Hinduism actually had a richness of an LGBTQ history that I had never been told about before, where there are mythological stories that talk about gender fluidity, about same-sex couples, about trans experiences that even divine deities would experience. I was told that those were all valid expressions of the divine, and as Felipe mentioned, that we are therefore valid expressions of the divine. In Sikhism, this idea of not actually even talking about the ideas of gender and sexuality, but having this commitment for mutual solidarity, responsibility, cooperation, and accountability, and therefore creating a space for unconditional service and love to all, is what helped create the foundation of the Sikh tradition. It was born out of rebellion, and it remains a tradition of rebellion. So when I had this epiphany that these two traditions in very different ways are affirming the wholeness of who I am, it became very easy for me to come out of the closet in sitting where I was convinced. The other part of this was coming out to my family and to society, which I was necessarily not prepared for. I had the privilege of being able to come out to parents who were curious, were confused, but were still accepting, and were willing to learn about how I am navigating this space on my own, and how they needed to learn more about their own faith traditions that they taught me from a person that they ended up having to teach about religion to in the first place. Once they knew, I didn't care who else knew. But what then became very clear was this need to understand that I actually cannot practice my faith wholeheartedly if it doesn't include every single other part of my identity as a human being. I cannot be a Hindu and Sikh and then not be bisexual. Bisexuality doesn't just get to sit at the door of the temple when I go to the altar and pray. And in knowing that and realizing that it accompanies me everywhere that I go means that I will unapologetically live into those identities together, and that nothing will separate them, just as much as they try to separate it from me. And so I kind of want to jump in with just thinking about so much of the richness and the vulnerability in this space, and kind of ask each of you a question that's sort of been sitting with me. The first question I'd like to ask is of Salome. Salome, you are based in Nigeria. You are in a current political context where a lot of LGBTQ people have to be really prepared for whatever can happen, because many countries in Africa right now some may be shifting to becoming more progressive and having a change in policies about how they see same-sex unions and stuff like that. Just recently, I think a couple of days ago, Mauritius became the newest country in the African Union to actually now accept same-sex partnerships. And they are now the 4th or 5th country in Africa to do that. Whereas in a country like Nigeria, very strict policies have been passed, and just as recently as several weeks ago, a raid happened on a wedding that was a same-sex wedding that ended up getting a lot of people arrested, sent to jail, and hurt in a lot of ways. And I'm curious from your perspective, as you entered this conversation that's very open, what does it mean to you to be someone who constantly has to live in this state of uncertainty? And how do you navigate these identities in an environment that still doesn't entirely accept you as you are, but that it could also have legal implications for who you are?
Okay. Well, I have to say that it's very, very difficult, and it's very, very difficult. Something happened to me very recently, not recently. I think it was an accumulation of unhealed trauma as a result of the complexities of and the intersections of my identities. During my when in my place of work, they started picking on me, and I had to stop going to work. That was I think 2 years back or 3 years back. In my neighborhood, anytime people come close to me, and maybe men are making advances at me, because you can't come out and say no, because yeah. And some people set me up in 2015 in my neighborhood. It was a conspiracy between people from my place of work and then people in the neighborhood. The aftermath of that setup was blackmail, violent sexual assault on many occasions. And at the end of the day, I had to leave that place where I was staying. I had to relocate from that place, because anywhere I go to, I'll see those. Go somewhere with my friends to go and hang out. Immediately I enter, 10 minutes, he would just come and sit down, be looking at me. Anywhere I'm going, I can't move. I don't know whether they were stalking me, not that they were telling me anything, but they would just appear, and it made me really uncomfortable. So I had to leave the environment, even in the compound where I was staying. Everybody that I was a lesbian, so people started avoiding me, and I started living in isolation. And along the line, and then I stopped going to work. I didn't go to work for about 9 months, after which I started staying with my sister, and then one of my friends introduced me to the Euphrates Institute. She was an alumni, so she told me about it, and she told me to apply, that into healing and all of that. I was really, really falling apart at the time, and I was actually thinking of maybe just ending it so that I'll rest, because nobody likes me, nobody wanted to be my friend. I was just on my own. So when I started the Euphrates Peace Practice Alliance program, I started learning about personal peace practice, because I was living in so much anxiety. I can't concentrate on one thing for a particular time. I was always just not okay. I was in fear. And then I started engaging in those personal peace practices. I started becoming more intentional. I started learning about mindfulness. I started meditating. I always meditate. And so after some time, I was reinstated back to my place of work. And so, but still, anytime I go to my place of work, I'm still not free because people still look at me like that. It's better because now I know how to like navigate it. The anxiety has reduced. Regulating myself. So what I can say is you just have to learn how to live within yourself. It starts from within. It starts from within. You have to like learn how to accept the fact that this may not change in as much as still here. And in as much as they think you're not valid or you're evil or you're sinful, I have come to realize that that is not who I am, because all this while I thought I would, because nobody wants to be hated. Nobody wants to stay in isolation. Nobody wants something that I couldn't do. And so I learned how to accept myself the way I am. I understood that it is not something bad, coupled with some of the videos and some of the books I read from some gay authors like Matthew Vines and some people like that. So to be very honest, my 6 months at that to accept myself fully, because before then, but I am more confident of myself now. And in as much as the law still hasn't changed, I have changed because I have accepted myself and I have forgiven myself for hating myself. And the people that hated me and treated me badly, I have forgiven them. And I just hope that people will learn to love people the way they are, because nobody is better than anybody. We are all created in the image of God and we are all children of God. So what I can say is it's difficult, but it's better now because now I have a community. It's through the Euphrates Institute that I was introduced to Tahil, and we have started doing some stuff together. So I can say that it has been difficult, but it's a lot better now. And then we're hoping during the course of my Peace Practice Alliance, we also started a nonprofit with some people that I met there. And we are working to heal some of the harm that in the LGBT community, because so many people in the spaces are afraid, they are in hiding, and they are really traumatized. So we are working to see how we can start repairing some of these harms from within, because the personal thing, if you accept yourself and nobody else accepts you, it won't bother you. That's the important thing. So that is where I am right now.
Thank you for that, Salome. And I'm very thankful for Salome's time and energy and wisdom, because we are thankfully working on a Pan-African network of interfaith LGBTQ advocates that includes Salome and a couple of other colleagues right now. And we're having some ideas sort of come together, and they're bubbling, they're incubating. So I'm really excited to get to work with them in making this actually a place where young folks who are at this unique intersection can actually find community together in Africa, and also find that they have those affirming them on all other continents. So I'm really excited for that. Bishop Deon, I have a question to you about a word that you used in particular that I think it would be helpful to get more of your wisdom on, and that is intentionality. You use that word intentionally, of course, when talking about the intentionality of your grandmother reminding us that we are all children of God. When it came to your focus on advocating for, your identity, as well as just people who identify as LGBTQ at large, and the intentionality of having the church apologize for hurting others. Why, in this case, do you feel that intentionality is important in the face of when many faith leaders and interfaith communities talk about unity and harmony and not talking about differences? Why do you think it's important for us to be intentional about centering other identities in this work?
Well, before I answer that question, I wanted to say thank you to Felipe and Salome for sharing your story. And I'll repeat what I said earlier, for the ways that the church has hurt you both, the way that faith has hurt you both. I am so sorry. People of faith should be better. And I think that it calls us in hearing your stories and in you sharing your stories, that there is a deep spirituality and a deep grounding and a deep yearning for that faith tradition and faith community that feeds you. And for them to have failed you, to me, is a failure on all of our parts. So I offer you my deepest apologies for the ways that you've been hurt. If we're not intentional, it is quite easy to just simply sweep the past hurts and the past things that have been done under the rug. Unity for the sake of just simply being unified is a false unity. So for any faith tradition to say, well, we are going to make peace with what we have done to push to the margins or to push to the side those who should have been pulled to the center, without acknowledging what was done, again, is false piety in my opinion. I can only speak for me. And so for the church to be authentically who it is, and I'm speaking of Christianity for the most part right now, especially for Christianity to be the best of who it is, we need to do a couple things. We have to be intentional about asking for forgiveness because we need to be forgiven. We need to be intentional about saying those who have been pushed to the margins are now pulled to the middle. If we're following Jesus, that is what Jesus did. He didn't go out and say to people, well, get your life together first and then come and follow me. He simply said, bring your brokenness, bring all those places where you have been hurt, all those places where you have been wounded, come and follow me, and together we will figure out what healing looks like for you. I often use the story of Bartimaeus. So the story that Jesus tells of blind Bartimaeus, he's been blind from birth, and he's sitting outside of the city of Jericho. Jericho is where the 1% have their summer homes. So he's sitting outside the richest place in the area, and he yells out to Jesus, and everybody says to him, "Shut up! You don't need to be calling out Jesus. He doesn't even want to see you." But Jesus looks at him and says to him, "Well, what do you want me to do for you?" And he says, "I want to be healed." And everybody focuses, I think, on the fact that Bartimaeus got healed. What I would posit is that Jesus intentionally saw Bartimaeus, but the people that were healed that day wasn't Bartimaeus. I think the crowd was healed because Jesus centered someone who had been pushed to the side. And throughout his ministry, that is what he does. He pulls people who have been pushed to the side into the center and says, God's kingdom is most manifest in these people that you have rejected. If we are doing our work as the church right, we are standing on the side of LGBTQIA+ folks. We are standing on the side of our trans siblings who are being murdered and killed across the country for simply being who they are. We would be standing on the side of queer trans folks of color who are disproportionately dying. We would be standing by our youth and our younger people who have a higher instance of suicide, and higher instances of depression and all the other things that go with it. And so for me, part of the work I think the church is called to do, and that I get to call the church towards, is that we have to be intentional in being able to see folks, to apologize for the way that we have treated folks, and then asking, how can we intentionally make sure that this does not happen in another generation? I'll end with one little quick story. I have a congregation in my diocese that is in a very, very conservative place. I mean, Missouri is a red state, but this is like red in their county. And this is the conservative congregation. A young family with 2 boys moved in, started coming to the church. One of those boys identified as non-binary when he turned 12, kind of a little bit like Felipe's story. And what happened is that congregation, because they watched that child grow up, embraced that child. And I got the chance to baptize that child when they turned 12 years old. And, for this child that identifies as non-binary to be accepted by their faith community and to be baptized by the openly gay Black bishop meant so much to him. But I think what meant more to him was that his community embraced him. And without me having to say a word, they put up a pride flag in front of the church to say, this is going to be a place of, we may be conservative, we may be in the reddest of the red part of the state, but this is one of us, and we know that God calls us to love that person. So for me, transformation happens when we're intentional about making sure that people who've been pushed to the side are brought to the center.
Those are such profound stories, Bishop. Representation matters. Feeling humanized and dignified matters. Knowing that no part of you gets left at the door matters. All of those things are just beautiful to hear. So thank you for that sharing. And Felipe, a question that I want to ask you, coming into this as someone who has had a very real battle with faith, battle with religion, that has caused trauma, that has invited you to look at the world through still having compassion for others, and to the point where you literally work for an organization that is trying to spread compassion everywhere. For you, as someone who enters this, knowing that there has been this bad blood, this trauma that has come from various forms of communities of faith, from practices of faith, what role does compassion play for you now as someone who is sort of engaging in this work for a better world, even when it's in the face of finding compassion for those who may not have compassion for you still?
Oof, okay, loaded question. Thank you. Okay, I feel like before I answer this, I feel like we need to have a moment to define what compassion is. So for me, let's I guess share with a story. So you're walking down the street, you see a person in pain, you understand that person is in pain, that's sympathy. You walk down the street, you see that person in pain, you check that they're in pain, but you're also feeling that pain with them, that's empathy. I am sad because that person is sad. You walk down the street, you see that person in pain, you feel that pain with them, and then you take action, you take steps to eliminate that person's pain. That to me is compassion. So we understand now the principle of compassion is a principle of action. It's about me, even if it's not affecting me personally, I want to take action. I want to do something in order for that pain to be eliminated from that person's life. understanding that concept, then let's go into your question. I feel like we all deserve compassion. We all are creations of the divine. The divine lives within us. We're all one. So I feel like as a basic principle, as a basic structure of that belief system, is for me to understand that somebody else might be in pain. And if I am able, how can I eliminate the pain from that person's life? At the same time, I think there's an important principle that we need to consider, which is self-compassion, which not a lot of us fully embrace because of the way that we were raised, because of society in many ways. I feel like sometimes referring to self-compassion to many people and to even religious communities, that might sound selfish, that might sound too independent, too outside of the box because you are caring for yourself. I want to remind everyone that in order for us to care for anybody else, in order for us to pour more water into other people's vessels, you need to have your vessel full. Self-compassion is priority. It is crucial. The most important thing, especially I'm thinking myself as a 12-year-old kid where like I hated myself. Self-compassion would have done a lot of things there in order for me to change the way that I behaved and the way that I acted. And so it's important to have and to consider self-compassion first. And as we develop that compassion for our own selves, compassion naturally flows into everything around us. Let that be women's rights, let that be the environment, let that be whatever it is that is keeping you up at night. Compassion overflows as long as you are being self-compassionate. And so, I lost that. Tahel, will you repeat the question to me, please? Because I was going somewhere, but I lost it.
Sure, no worries. All of that to say, how do you define compassion in the context of how you go forward doing the work that you do? Even when that compassion that you're talking about is supposed to be unconditional, and therefore even towards those who still may not extend it to you because of the intersection that you're at.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think one of the most important principles that I could leave on this forum and this conversation, this panel, is the golden rule. Any religion, any spiritual practice throughout time has somewhere the golden rule, even if it's in your sacred text or passed down by like oral, storylines and everything. Treat others as you want to be treated. Do not do unto others what you do not want done to you. It is the basic principle that is found in the Bible, in the Quran, Sanskrit, and everywhere. Almost every religion, almost every spiritual practice, in almost every civilization throughout time, we find the golden rule as a standing angular stone principle of every single belief system. What does that mean? To me, means that I need to decenter myself from the universe that I am, that I have been taught, that all my experiences, everything comes through me, right? And to take myself away from that center and put somebody else and feel and understand and see through those person's eyes, to experience what that person is experiencing, in order for me to understand that the divine, as much as it is in me, is in them. Understanding that I can see somebody else's eyes, and I can see myself, and I can see the divine, and I can see God, and I can see the universe, whatever you want to call it. Understanding that I am an equal, that I am the same, allows me to have more patience, more compassion, more love, and more understanding for whatever the other person is feeling. Even if I understand that that person does not see me and my existence as divine. Because what they have thought, what they have been taught, what they have been told is that I am against God. Understanding the principle of the golden rule, decentering myself, and understanding that somebody else's experience has not been the same as mine, allows me to have more compassion and more empathy for their experience, for the way that they react, and for the things that they do. Now, the golden rule is not telling me that I'm going to be submissive to somebody else's idea. The golden rule is not telling me that because I need to understand somebody else, I need to put myself aside. No. The golden rule is telling me that that person is an equal, and that I have the opportunity to hopefully enlighten them somehow to understand that I also am part of the divine. For them to understand, like, maybe you haven't met another queer person. Maybe you don't know what trans feels like or be like. At the same time, you don't need to understand it, but that's that's like a lesson, like, 20 years later and whatnot. but understanding the conditions of the person might not have put them in the position for them to understand where I am is not my problem. I can give them as much as I can. I can provide information. I can ask questions so I can spark curiosity in their minds for them to explore and understand more. And I will do that because I'm a compassionate person and I care about the golden rule and I want to do that. But I will give the opportunity. If that person doesn't take the opportunity, that is okay. Because there are billions more that need more enlightening. And I myself, knowing that I'm a limited human being, will spend my energy on other people that will understand that. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be mean, that I'm going to be antagonistic about this person at all. But I will understand that I myself do not need to spend more of my energy to convince or to tell somebody else anything else, because I can keep moving and I'm going to go forward as the divine is asking me to do so.
I'm learning so much new stuff from you today, Felipe, because as someone that's known you as a colleague for so long, it's so nice to see you in your element, and such important reminders about, the deep relationship between self-compassion and the golden rule. If you're not showing yourself compassion, how are you going to show compassion to the world? And if you're centering hatred, animosity, and negative emotions towards yourself, then how will you, of course, you'll reflect those things in the world. And it's so important to make sure that you have grace and dignity so that it's solidified within you and fortified in your relationship with others. So I think getting to learn that from you is super great. And it's actually making me think about one of the challenges that I think often came with these conversations about gender and sexuality in my home. Oftentimes in the South Asian context, there are very traditional gender roles that go back, centuries, if not thousands of years, that are connected to things like the caste system, and that make me, cringe much of the time, because I can't remember the number of get-togethers that I've been to where all of the men are sitting in the living room watching TV and talking about politics, and supposedly that has to be separate from all the women who have to go to the kitchen to make food and to gossip. And that was the upbringing that I had in my home, back in India with my extended family, and also among a lot of other South Asian spaces. But there was a story that comes out of Hindu mythology that I no one told me about, that I just discovered, that focuses on the story of the god Shiva, who is the god of destruction, and the goddess Parvati, also known as Shakti, who is the goddess of power. A sage walks to them, and the sage has been in meditation for centuries, and comes to know that his once bachelor deity of a god named Shiva is now married to a woman who he just considers a woman. And he says, I'm here to worship my God, and I am here to worship no one else. You as a woman in my God's life mean nothing to me, and I will not consider you worth worship as well. Shiva says, you should know very well that within her you should see me, because she is my greater half. She is not even my equal half. And most importantly, you should remember that without her, I cannot be anything. You have to understand that in this world that was created, manifested, sustained, and will be destroyed, the balance of the masculine and the feminine is a requirement. It is not just something that we've considered and decided is okay. And from this conversation, the god and the goddess merge into a divine new entity, a new deity that is known as Ardhanarishwar, which is the one who is equally masculine and feminine in all ways. And this stubborn sage decides to still worship only the masculine side. The gods separate again, and the goddess Parvati says, all right, fine. If you want to just worship Shiva, that is completely fine with me. I will just take away everything feminine associated with you so you can continue to live a masculine life. She grants that blessing, and he turns into ash. And the sage says, what has happened to me? I have become nothing. And she says, exactly, because you have taken every part of me away from you, and therefore you are nothing. And what a message that brings in us having to think about, how do the masculine and the feminine play a role in all of us as individuals who need to center these values of compassion, of justice, and of a willingness to be able to have dignity? And how do we extend that, express that into the world that continues to form these sort of diatribes and dichotomies of things being traditional, binary, and needing to be unchanged? And that coming from a wisdom tradition of centuries is such a big way of understanding that these are not new ideas, actually. These ideas are as old as time itself, as stories themselves, and how they help us really think and navigate in this space. But a final question that I want to ask before we turn it to you all for some questions or thoughts is this idea about advocacy. One big theme that is coming out of our conversations is having the willingness to advocate for yourself through self-compassion, through unapologetic, naming of your identity, through finding ways of being able to know that you can navigate spaces with, some safety and security. But a lot of this also requires major changes that are needed in legislation, in culture, in policing, and in many other parts of society. So for each of you, it would be important to know, what are your pieces of advice or your suggestions of how allies in this space today who will be watching in the future can really engage with advocating for LGBTQ people in a faith space or in an interfaith space, when trying to make sure we are talking about an equity of representation and uplifting the folks who are often marginalized, as Bishop Deon, you mentioned earlier. So to succinct the question, what are some pieces of advice or some best practices you would recommend for advocating for LGBTQ people in faith-based and interfaith spaces? And this is whoever wants to go first, so I leave it to each of you.
I'll go first.
Sure, Felipe.
I think that kind of like going with what I said before, the most important thing that we can do as queer people in religious spaces, in order for us to advocate for our rights, for our lives, for our well-being, first of all, once again, is self-compassion, right? You need to love yourself. You need to take care of yourself first. This could also mean, and this might sound a little drastic, but I'm being 100% solid and candid about this. If you feel less than in any sort of religion, in any sort of congregation, that's not your congregation. That's not the place for you to be worshiping at. You want to keep worshiping, you want to be communing with the divine every Sunday, every Saturday, every Wednesday, wherever it is, you find yourself a place that appreciates you and loves you and respects you and gives you the worth that your life is, first of all. If you are not able to get that from the community that you're trying to commune with God, that's not your community and you should not be there. And I'm sorry if this feels like a personal attack to some religions that might be listening to this webinar right now. I left the Mormon Church. I left Christianity because I felt like less than. I am not able to get to the most incredible heaven that I have been offered because I cannot marry a woman. Done. So first of all, for any queer person that is listening to this, love yourself, respect yourself, understand yourself, and know that if a community, a religious community, is not supporting you the way that you should be supported, get out of there, because your worth is first. Second, once we get to a community that is supportive, just like the Mormon Church, when I was a missionary, was saying, oh, we're going to gather in brother so-and-so so we can canvass their neighborhood and tell no to gay marriage, you should be able and feel safe enough to mobilize your community, whether that is religious, whether that is your family, whether it is their friends. You should be able to feel comfortable sharing that your experience is being threatened by social policy or anything that is going on in your state or in your locality, and hopefully mobilize people and feel the support that those people should be giving you. Once again, if you're not feeling that, that community is not for you. It sounds so harsh. But for anyone that will be watching this later on this recording, if you're a queer person and you want to worship the divine, you want to commune with God, find yourself a place that you will not be second place, that you would not be less than. You are an equal. That's first and foremost. If we find communities that are compassionate, if we find religious groups or spiritual groups that put the golden rule first, they will be with you every step of the way. Because the true believers, the people that understand that we are interconnected, that we are one, that we are the same creation that it has been and will be, they will support. And so I think that the most important, and this is also a cautionary tale to religions and spiritual practices that are not embracing queer people in their own places. You will lose us. And we are incredible gifts of the divine. And I'm not going to be apologetic about it because I am, and I know I am. And I know that all my queer siblings are as well. So, yeah, I feel like, again, golden rule, self-compassion, compassion for everybody else. Feel you supporting your community. Score.
Well, I will jump in and I will echo what Felipe said. One of the to our siblings in the LGBTQIA plus community, I would say, remember, there's this wonderful line or wonderful scene in Black Panther where the Queen says to King T'Challa, "Remember who you are." And it was that moment where he remembered who he was. But I don't think she was telling him to remember who he was. Remember whose you are. And so for our siblings, I would say, remember always whose you are. You are a beloved child of God. No one can take that away from you. No one can diminish that. Nothing here can undo that. And as Felipe said, if you're in a community that is not willing to accept you for who you are, that is not where you belong. Our presiding Bishop Michael Curry, who preached that, the guy from the royal wedding, he has a great line that says, if it's not about love, it's not about God, because God is love. And that pretty much sums it up. If it is not about God, if it's about hating people or pushing people to the side, that is not of and or about God. For our allies, my advice would be a couple things. The first one is ask. If you don't understand why pronouns are important, just ask. If you don't understand what being trans or any other of the letters mean, ask. The best thing that you can do is ask a question and not assume. What I would add to the asking is listen. The more we can listen to each other's story, the more that we can walk alongside each other as companions in these journeys, the more that we can be with each other and hear others' stories, the more compassionate we become. Because compassion at its heart is hearing, recognizing, and centering the other person's story. So make sure that you actually listen when you ask the question. Don't assume, listen for a response. The other part is, and the last part I would add to that is show up. In the spaces that are not safe for your siblings, that is the place that you are safe to show up and advocate. And the times when our siblings can't have a voice, you can be a voice for the voiceless. We don't make progress by yelling our own rights from the rafters. We mark progress by finding allies who can walk alongside of us and do the hard work that needs to be done sometimes to change hearts and minds. And so being an advocate. So ask, actually listen, show up, and advocate.
Thank you, Bishop. Salome.
The advice I would give for LGBT advocacy within interfaith spaces is, first thing and the main thing that I believe is understanding. Seek to understand that somebody is different from you. Difference does not mean bad. Difference is just difference, and it is okay to be different. So seek to understand, not to judge, but to connect, because we are all one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank each and every one of you. I don't know about everyone else in the room right now, but I think I can certainly say that the wisdom is profound. Thank you, Salome, Bishop Deon, Felipe, for your words, your unapologetic choice to be here and to speak your truth, and to share with folks who really need to hear why it's important to understand the joy and the trauma of navigating these spaces with intersectional identity. It is so important to remember that no community, no faith tradition is monolithic, but however it presents itself, it can make a lasting impact. And just before I turn it over for any potential questions, I do want to just put up a quick poll of a few questions that are quick to answer, just about your time in the space today and how you felt. They're all multiple choice, so I wish I could get more feedback. If you'd like to send me an email for feedback, I'd be more than happy to receive it from you, and I'll add that in the chat. But in the meantime, I've launched the poll. If any of you all would just like to answer these questions quickly, and then we can wrap up.
Quick question to Hill. How do we answer that? Because I see the, oh, you click on it. Okay. Never mind. Well, no, because I have like panel follow-up poll, but like when I try to click on the answer, it doesn't take me anywhere.
You're one of the hosts, so you won't see it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's why.
Thank you, Bishop Deon. Exactly.
I was a techie in another life.
We know a few other folks are in the room still taking it, so we'll give them a chance to do that.
And honestly, while we're answering these questions, Tahil
Yeah.
and everybody else that is watching this, I just want to give you thanks from the bottom of my heart to be able to host this space for this queer guy to like talk about things that might be like really like harsh at times. I feel like we all have experience of seeing that person that gets left out in a congregation or a community for being different or for doing things that we thought that might not be. But it's so crucial and so important to embrace new concepts that maybe we never thought that were possible, or things that we were so against before, and understanding that, like, this is our normality, this is who we are, and being able to embrace that change is important, it's crucial. And it's because of people like you that are part of this panel that we can change and create the change in our different communities, because this idea spread through experience. It's the way that we are becoming friends now, that I see you and you see me and see that I'm a regular ass human being trying to live the same way that you are, that you see, you know what? I know this gay kid that was a Mormon, and like he could have stayed Mormon, but he wasn't because he wasn't accepted. He's really happy. He's doing really well, but he's not part of that anymore. And I would love to have that gay kid that we are ostracizing to be part of this community and to enjoy the joy that they bring, because I understand now that there's so much more that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most beautiful things that we can partake from the interfaith movement, is this incredible acceptance and inclusion that all of us can be part of. And then we can share into our own congregations, into our own spiritual groups, into our own group of friends, and share those experiences and realize that we are so much more than what we thought we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that we take the full responsibility to fight for the joy and the abundance of those people, whether they are in our communities, have left our communities, or have never been in our communities. I think that's a very important thing to remember too. So thank you for that, Felipe. It's my privilege to make this space possible, and to just do it differently, do interfaith very differently than we're used to. That's what I'm really thankful for getting to do as regional coordinator. We have a couple minutes left, and I've allowed folks to unmute themselves as they feel comfortable. So if anyone would like to share any thoughts or a quick question to ask of any of our panelists specifically, we have another 3 to 5 minutes, so I wish we had more time, but that just means, based on the poll results, that you all want to have more of these conversations and jump into a deeper dive. So I think we can definitely prioritize that. Audrey, please.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you, Tahil, Felipe, and Bishop Deon and Salome. This has been a very wonderful, provided a very opportunity for us to really listen and hear at a deep level. It raised a lot of questions for me in terms of an older set here who's been in a marriage for over 20 some odd years, and having to walk, just gingerly at times, but still wanting our gift to be that showing up authentically who we are, no matter where we are. And one of the things that you did so well, all of you, is to also speak to that space where, when we're not in a place where we feel comfortable, when we're not in a place where we feel safe, to remember that we are always in a space of choice. Now, we may not know that completely. Sometimes there are things that have happened that we don't know, that they're so overwhelming. But just in your mind, if you just hold that we're always at that place of choice, and the ultimate consciousness that lifts us up and gives us that sense of being alive in who we are, comes from that space. And so it may not be a church, it may be, I'm a reverend, so I use that church reference, but it may also just be in a family. It may be where you work. Once you embrace that sense of your own identity. And, you know, some of us have a whole lot to go through to get there, as has been expressed here. And so I just want to say thank you for your love and your compassion and your delivery here this evening.
Lots of love to you and to Karen, Audrey. Having you all be involved in one of the first public conversations that we had with URI about this was a privilege. Audrey and Karen were our facilitators for an intergenerational conversation about this very topic, and there was a lot of learning that came out of that I'm thankful for, and the wisdom continues through new voices, new faces, new perspectives. So thank you both. Esther.
Thank you. I wish we could hug everybody.
Same.
Esther, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you. My name is Esther. I'm calling from Nigeria. I just want to appreciate you for this opportunity. I totally enjoyed the conversation, and I've been able to learn a lot of things that I have been dealing with myself that I wasn't aware of. Thank you so much, Bishop Deon, Felipe, and Salome. I think it's been a very intense and deep conversation. And we just don't have to sit here and have these conversations. We need to take them to the streets, of course. As we interact with people, these conversations have to continue. We can't just have them here and then stop here. So, and it's been a pleasure because I have been working with volunteering with Salome's nonprofit. So this has further given me the resolve to put in the work of advocacy, you know, to see that people or from the community are able to live and enjoy life like every other human being should. So thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Esther, for joining us also from Nigeria and staying up until 1:30 in the morning just to listen to this conversation.
Yes.
That's a very, very honored commitment, and we're thankful for that.
Thank you very much.
Can I say something really quickly? Esther, Salome, and anybody else that's listening from Nigeria, my heart goes to you because you're not only dealing with the inequities that come from religion, but also from the law of the land. And I am speaking with so much privilege because even though I might not be accepted in a religion, I am still safe in this country and I can be who I am, thankfully. And so with that being said, oh my God, I am so grateful that you exist and that you are there. But I'm also very conscious and understanding that you are at a very high risk. And I'm hoping that you're being safe. And that as you are sharing these experiences and creating change in a country that needs it, you are being self-compassionate and careful so that you can keep being the light that you are right now.
And that you have a community of advocates here for you from around the world, most importantly. From faith leaders to community activists to everyone in between. So you are not alone. Always remember you are not alone. And I think that's a beautiful way to end this space and time together. Sharing my gratitude again for Bishop Deon, Salome, Felipe, and everyone who has been on this call. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both. Thank you for coming. Salome, you did an amazing job.
Yeah, she did. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
both. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.